Hello, folks. I'm Mandy St. Germain from One Smart World, and I'm coming to you today to speak about the skills that we all need for success in life. So everywhere in the world, we talk about the skills that people need to have, that schools are meant to be teaching and that employers are looking for. In Canada, we call them the skills for success or essential skills. In other countries, they're Partnership for 21st Century Skills. In the United States, every country has their take on it. And one of the most important ones that we keep seeing over and over again in all countries is problem solving. And at One Smart World, we like to think that every one of us is smart in our own way. And when we collaborate, we are truly smarter together. So we're talking about problem solving as individuals with our own issues, but also problem solving in terms of the really complex, difficult problems that need to be solved right now. We're experiencing unknown problems that we've never ever had to deal with before, and the solutions are not clear. And having some sort of way of thinking them through and expertise in doing that will be key to all of our successes in the future. I like this question. So Elon Musk, one of the richest man in the world right now, the job interview question that he likes to ask, which he thinks really is telling about people, is tell me about some of the most difficult problems you've worked on and how you solved them. So it's key that we all have education, we all have technical skills that we need to be able to use, but also on top of that, we also need to have skills that will help us to be able to work successfully through issues. So 94% of errors in the workplace are due to poor quality thinking, according to the Research Institute of America. And the World Economic Forum every few years comes out with a list of the skills that we need to have to be able to be successful. So these are the skills that we need in the workplace. So complex problem solving is the number one. Critical thinking helps us to be able to solve complex problems. Creativity, which is up from, I believe it was 10 for 2015. So creativity is creeping up the list there. People management, so being able to get things done with other people and through other people is key. And then the 10th one, which we also feel at One Smart World that we get at, is cognitive flexibility. So that's having the ability to think appropriately for the situation, applying the correct type of thinking that will help you to be successful in that situation, and being able to do that quickly. So you need to think in a different way when you're at home with your family, listening to some sort of problem. You need to be able to think in a different way when you're creating a plan or mapping out a project at work. And we need to be able to do that quickly and move between the appropriate kinds of thinking as is appropriate. So in this very short webinar, what we're going to be thinking and talking about is how you like to think. So that's number one. So first of all, identifying and having a little bit of self-knowledge about what's your favorite way of thinking, what's the kind of thinking that gets you excited, and then learning about thinking in color. So at One Smart World, we've created a system, a vocabulary or language for talking about thinking. And then once we've learned a little bit about that, we're going to apply the concepts of thinking in color to problem solving. So we're going to map it out and see what that looks like. So this is just a quick overview of the kinds of work that are needed currently and into the future. So you can see the routine manual, non-routine manual, and routine cognitive types of work are on the decrease. So more and more jobs are being taken over, or parts of jobs are being taken over by artificial intelligence and making life simpler for us in many ways. So we're not necessarily required to do a lot of the repetitive, routine sorts of tasks and thinking that may go into that. What is going to be more required into the future are the non-routine, so sort of things that we can't anticipate, that we need to figure out often on the fly, and we need to be able to do that with people. So non-routine interactive jobs are on the increase. So currently we're experiencing a pandemic, and every single business is having to, as we say, pivot almost daily to try to figure out how to stay in business, how to serve their clients, how to remain vital, how to fall within safety standards, how to keep people safe, And we have to keep thinking about it every single day to stay relevant and just to stay alive, basically, in so many ways. So being able to think differently and think through problems is the I see here in the small town where I live, businesses who haven't been able to do that and haven't been able to figure things out are gone. The ones who've been able to morph almost week by week are the ones who are continuing to keep their heads above water. So we do know that with practice, we can grow our brains, we can develop our brains. We know in this age in 2021 that we know our brains are plastic, as we call them. We know about neuroplasticity, that the more we exercise our brains in certain ways, the more we will develop the neural pathways within our brain that help us to make those operations happen more quickly. So the more we practice thinking in a certain type of way, the more easily and quickly that thinking will come to us. So we firmly believe that, yes, we all have skills. Yes, we're already all smart. And with some practice, we can develop the kinds of thinking that may not be our favorite ways of thinking, but that are key to our success. So you may have taken your mini 4DI. So the 4DI is our instrument, our psychometric assessment that you can take online. We have a mini on our website, and your results would look like this. It's not a scientifically valid test. It's simply 6 questions that relate to our more scientifically valid 4DI instrument, but it gives you a very quick entry level into what's your preferred kind of thinking. We also have the full version. We think of the mini as sort of a taste of this version. This is a full report, is completely scientifically valid, has been around for over 20 years now. And we've got, hundreds of thousands of people in our database who have taken this. So this will give you a very comprehensive report about how you like to think. So I would suggest, if you haven't already done either one of these, that before we proceed, you find out about doing that, and you get a little clue into how you like to think. Excuse me. So we've created one common language. So if you're learning how to read, you learn the ABCs, as the song goes. Once you've learned how to, what the letters mean, how to put them together, you can create anything. You can write poetry, you can write technical manuals, you can write love letters, you can write essays. Just having those 26 letters gives you unfathomable opportunities to be able to write and express yourself. We also have the numbers that we mostly all know how to use and are good at. Once we know what these numbers mean and we know how they work with each other, we can do all kinds of things mathematically. And we like to think that with the language that we have created for thinking, once you understand what each of these 3 colors mean, it gives you a language for talking about thinking. So we've color-coded the 3 colors, red, yellow, and green, to a traffic light, just because we feel that a traffic light is a common symbol. Most people understand what the colors of the lights mean. They mean the same thing around the world. So if we start with green, this relates to thinking, and hopefully it helps to make the types of thinking more easy to remember and a bit sticky, as we say. So when you're using your green thinking, it's related to creative thinking. So similarly, at a traffic light, when you come to a green light, it's sort of full steam ahead. Hopefully you look around a little bit to see what everybody else is doing, but you're going through that intersection. Similarly, when people are being creative together, there's often a lot of energy, there's talking, people are interrupting each other, they're often having fun, sometimes there's hilarity, and there's a lot going on when we're using our green thinking. In yellow, similar to the light, we're slowing down and taking in information, looking around to see if it's safe to proceed. And when we're using our yellow thinking, we're trying to understand what's going on with whatever situation we're in. So we're taking in information at that point. We're applying our analytical and understanding thinking to whatever situation we're in. And when we're using our red, decisive thinking, similar to the traffic light, you come to a red light, you stop. Hopefully, if you're using red in any sort of thinking process, You stop thinking about that thing. You've had an opportunity to gather some ideas with your green thinking. You've tried to understand some situations, people, using your yellow thinking, and now we're into red, and we're going to stop thinking about that process, make a decision, draw a line in the sand and say, this is what we're doing, and then move on to something else. So that's what the colors represent. So if you have your results, I just want everybody to know that we don't pigeonhole you when we don't say, oh, you're a red, or oh, you're a green, or a yellow. We see we're all a complete mixture of each of those colors. Some of us will have highs, some of us will have lows in each of those colors. You probably have one type of thinking that you prefer to use over the others. So we think of this, we call this our 4S model. So at the top, we think about your favorite color, your preferred color is your thinking style that you most prefer to use. It's not an indication of your ability to use that color or how well you use that color. It's just that's the one you like to use the most. So at the top, we have a thinking style. That relates to a stage of a process. So if we were thinking something through together, there's a time and a place for each of those ways of thinking. So most often at the beginning of a problem, we would do some green thinking. So we would do some creative thinking. Excuse me. What are all our options for solving this? What does the most possible wonderful solution look like? So that's very green thinking. So that stage of the process we would call, the creative stage. There's also a stage in a process where we would do some understanding yellow thinking. And there's also a stage of a process where we would do some red decision-making thinking. So regardless of what my favorite type of thinking is, the one that I really like to use, I understand that when I'm thinking something through, I may need to think outside of my comfort zone and apply another type of thinking at that point of the process. 21st century skills. So once we know how to use these and we put them together and we use this like a language, we can create any sort of skill that we want. So putting red, yellow, and green together will help us with problem solving. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through. And then also each of these colors can be a state of mind. So depending on what you're doing, you can be completely in a state of mind that isn't your most preferred color. So for instance, my most preferred color would be green, creative thinking. But I do know, just as an example now, when I go grocery shopping, which seems to be my only social outlet in this lockdown time, when I'm going shopping, I'm in the red state of mind. I've made up my mind what I'm getting. I'm going into the store, I'm executing, and I'm getting out as quickly as I can. Previously, I probably would have gone into a store, seen some neighbors, chatted, looked at some of the recipe cards that they have there, tried to make up my mind about what we might be eating, what have I forgotten, talking to people, it was a social event. But now I'm very much in red because that's helping me to be more successful. So I can turn that on, not my favorite, but I can do it when I have to. So everybody will have results. If you've done your 4DI, your results will look like this. So on the graph on the left, we have the 4 dimensions of thinking. So as I've just mentioned, we have green and yellow and red, and we'll all have a measure of how much we like to do each of these. There's no right or wrong in any of this. There's no better profile than another. This is just a preference. We also have white thinking here, which is our personal spirit. So that's sort of the driver of all the other colors. It's not related to anything spiritual. It's when Bob Wheely, who created this instrument, studied positive psychology, he found 3 distinct factors that help us in terms of being successful career-wise, academically, and in life in general. And he put those together in personal spirit. And we each have a measure of highs and lows within our personal spirit also. And then we divide that a little bit further into what we call mindsets. So we do each of those colors, the green, yellow, and red anyways, with the left side and the right side of our brain. And those are distinct ways of thinking. So on the left in green, we have creative thinking, which is sort of a process way to be green. So thinking creatively, but in a quite deliberate step-by-step way. We can also be creative, but in a more intuitive, emotions-based way. So that would be the green on the right, the warm green. Similarly, we have analytical thinking and understanding. So that's more about understanding of facts and figures. We have on the right, understanding more about people and moods and situations. So we call that compassion, because it's more tuning into what's going on with other humans. And then we know that as humans, we make decisions in 3 distinct ways. So we use critical thinking when we have a very logical decision to be made. We use our values, sometimes our beliefs around what is right and what is wrong. And we also use our intuition. And each of us will have a measure of how much we like to do those things. And I would say also that those 3 used in combination would make the best possible decisions. And also each of those ways of making decisions are more helpful in some situations than others. So for instance, if you're filling out your income tax return, using your intuitive decision making probably wouldn't be the best way to go. Using your logical decision making based on facts and figures probably would be the best way to go. If you're choosing a life partner, perhaps your logical critical thinking might come into it, but you might also want to temper that a little bit with, what your values and your heart is telling you. So when we put this together, we have a problem-solving process. So if we can purposely call up each of those ways of thinking and have it as part of a process, then we can think anything through. So as I said before, typically at the beginning of a process, we would do some creative thinking, come up with some options, gather some information, and make some decisions. So in terms of creative thinking, what that looks like. So we often think of creative thinking as exactly this: an artist standing in front of an easel, trying to figure out what he or she is going to create. But we also know that creative thinking is thinking, sometimes people say, outside of the box. It includes brainstorming, it includes envisioning, it includes seeing things differently in ways that people have never seen things before, starting from scratch, creating something that's never been created before. So it's not just creating of art, it's also creating creative thinking in your thoughts. A lot of times in organizations, creative thinking is done with others. So this to me is probably a very good example of brainstorming. It looks a little bit casual and informal. People are hopefully having fun and sharing ideas as they come to them. And in this situation, I think this young girl has probably just had a flash of insight, which would be the intuitive thinking. She's just realized something. The rest of the people around her haven't quite got it, aren't on the same page as her quite yet. But she's very much using her intuitive thinking. Her flash of insight type of thinking. And also often creative thinking can be done completely when you're by yourself. So for those of us who are more introverted, sometimes we actually need to be removed from people in order to come up with new and creative thoughts. So in the chaos of a meeting, when the boss says, we need to come up with 3 ideas right now and we're going to decide right now, people can also get ideas outside of that meeting. And some of us require time away from that chaos of being amongst others to be able to come up with new ideas. So our yellow thinking often looks like this. So, very structured, well-organized kinds of thinking. Lists are examples of our understanding thinking. The clothes organization on the left, maybe like some of our closets, no names mentioned. The one on the right definitely demonstrates somebody who would be really liking structured thinking. It can also be about reaching out to others and understanding others at a very personal level, understanding emotions and feelings that are going on, and understanding people and reaching out. So this is actually an Inukshuk, which is a Canadian symbol in our north, created by the Inuit as a symbol to others who come along that path to say, humans have been here before you. So it's actually an emotional way of reaching out. So that's our understanding thinking. When it comes time to use our decisive thinking, we're trying to decide between lots of options. So this may be what it looks like inside your head with so many things to choose between. But in decisive thinking, it's time to, call on one of them. Which direction are we going to go in? Our decisive thinking can also be very emotions-based. So here we have two examples of Canadian hockey teams. The one on the left, the Toronto Maple Leafs, seems to experience quite a lot of heartache and heartbreak because they haven't won any major championships, I don't think, in my lifetime. So this is an example of, people who have decided this is my team no matter what, and they feel a sense of passion. So this can be around a team, a cause, an issue, a way of life. But the decision has been made, these are the people that we support. I think I mentioned this already. So this would be people in the grocery store lineup. This is what we're experiencing now. We're all waiting outside, and it may not look as though these people are very decisive, because we often think about, when you're decisive, you're sort of moving ahead quickly, but hopefully these people have made their lists. So once they get inside, they can just execute what it is they need to get. So we know that you get a group of people that you work with sitting around the table, and we all think in different ways. And it's not always easy to see how people like to think, except I think for this fellow on the right with the very bright socks, I just imagined that he probably would be high in green just based on his sock choice. So understanding how other people like to think can be extremely helpful. So if they haven't done their 40i, in another subsequent webinar, I'll talk about what are some of the behaviors that you can observe to help you to understand perhaps where that person might be in that moment and how you can communicate most effectively with them. Ideally, we would try to communicate with somebody else the way they like to be communicated with. So understanding how they like to think could give you clues into how to do that the most successfully. So this is often what it looks like when you get a bunch of people together performing a task. And as humans, we all think that our own way of thinking is the best way to think, no matter what our way of thinking is. So we sort of see the people there high in red, driving us forward, driving for results. The people high in green might be thinking, oh, I'm going to try to go a different way this time. Let's mix it up a bit. Let's do something different. And then the people high in yellow are usually the organized planners, more sensitive people who like harmony. So they're trying to keep this boat from flipping over. But this is often what problem-solving processes or meetings look like until we have some way of being able to discuss things and work together collaboratively. So just as a suggestion, this might be a way, this is a way of color coding a very common thinking process for problem solving. So there's all sorts of literature out there about, what's the most logical sequence in which you can approach a problem. This seems to be one of the most well-documented ones. So first of all, what you would do would be identify the issue. So in our RED process, we have one of the thinking strategies that's called get to the crux. So really drill down and get to what is the crux of the problem that we're trying to solve here. What are we really talking about? That's the first step. Second would be, then you gather some information. So we've identified the issue. So an example of an issue that we dealt with not too long ago was with one of our airline partners. And they had decided that they didn't want to have any employees let go or quit or fired, sorry. So the crux of the issue was they needed to find savings, huge savings, but they weren't going to let anybody go. So the next step would be to gather information. So, how much money do we need to save? What are our current budgets? Let's look at what we've got. Let's just get the facts. Then we would analyze. So having gathered that information, we drill down a little bit more deeply. We analyze what it is we're talking about. Once we've done that, we've got a good handle on what the situation is. Then we would do some green thinking together. So we could develop some options. What are some crazy ways that we can address this perhaps we've never thought about before? What are some new and different ways of looking at things? Once we've done that, we can sort of organize the options, say, these three are ridiculous. These two can make it to our list based on the criteria that we developed in the beginning. Then we can decide this is what we're going to do. And then we always like to end in white. So somebody's got to take initiative. So as soon as a decision is made, there's action to be taken. So we need somebody to step up and, make the phone call, write the report, table the issue, whatever it may be. Because if you just end it aside, then nothing's going to happen. So this process can be approached in different ways depending on how complex your issue is. You might not need to get to the crux of an issue first. You might just start in, let's gather some information to help us evaluate the problem. It might be very simple. It might just be, we need to share some information. It might just be like a yellow information exchange. These can be done in different sequences, but this one is probably a pretty standard way of uncovering the problem, analyzing it, looking at new issues, evaluating, and deciding. And regardless of what your preferred way of thinking may be, if you understand, okay, as a group, we're now using red thinking. If red is not your preferred thinking style, most of us can probably turn it on when we have to, but if you absolutely cannot, then it's good to just sort of have an understanding, okay, the rest of the group is in red right now. I'm not going to try to impose my favorite color of thinking on everybody. I'm just going to sit and wait for us to move on to the next stage when I can get to, let's say, yellow. Similarly in green, if green isn't your favorite, you find it difficult to brainstorm or come up with ideas in the moment, then you just have to sit with it and let the people high in green get through that stage. And I find the people high in red are often, a little bit impatient, want there to be a decision, and it may feel a little bit painful to sit through all this information gathering and creating of new crazy ideas. But as long as there is some red at the end of the process and there is a decision, we do know we're going to get to a decision. I find often the people who are high in red can sit and wait and realize, okay, in 15 minutes, it's going to be my chance to, finally wrap this up, have everybody make a decision, and then we can decide on who's going to take some initiative. So often people think, I already know the answer to this problem. I don't need to go through this process. But I'll guarantee you that the more time you do spend in soliciting the thinking preferences of all the people in your group, or the cognitive diversity of your group, the better your outcomes will be. So if you allow the people high in yellow to help you organize, help you analyze, dig deeper, you're going to get a better option. If you do allow the people who are high in green to come at it from a different angle, to see things that you've never seen before, you'll get a better solution. And then, of course, we always end in white, where we take initiative. We're hopeful that we're going to be able to solve this problem and move forward. So that's basically how we apply the thinking preferences to creating a problem-solving process and thinking things through with other people. So I hope that's been helpful. And if you'd like to learn more, please contact us via our website at onesmartworld.com or on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thank you very much.